The New York Mets continue to add arms to their stockpile of relievers, but none of them are coming off a good 2023 season. The latest, Jorge Lopez, an all-star in 2022, but one of the worst relievers in baseball this past year. What can we make of all the moves that David Stearns has made for the Mets bullpen? I'm going to break it all down on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, I had an entire show set to go where I was breaking down the 2026 homegrown New York Mets. We'll release that at some point, maybe next week, maybe over the weekend. But the Mets made another move. They signed Jorge Lopez, a one-year, $2 million deal. So I decided to scrap the original show and finally do a dive I've been planning on doing for a while, but didn't want to commit the research time. The Mets are adding a relief pitcher seemingly every other day, and none of them are coming off good years. But David Stearns is known for being able to put together a good bullpen. So I really wanted to go through all the numbers, try to figure out what the vision is for David Stearns and how the Mets are going to try to cobble together a bullpen that's going to be effective next season. But it all begins with the Lopez signing, which is the one that I think fans can get the most excited about because he was an all-star in 2022, and this guy throws the ball harder than a lot of pitchers in the game. This past year, his fastball, or sinker, averaged over 96 miles per hour. He was in the 90th percentile when it comes to fastball velocity. It was actually closer to 97, 96.8 miles per hour. 2022, he averaged over 97 on that pitch. So he throws the ball hard. He's a former starting pitcher, so he actually has a 4-pitch mix. But really, it all comes down to that sinker and subsequently his 4-seam fastball. What you look at with Jorge Lopez is a guy who in 2022 looked like one of the best relief pitchers in baseball before the trade deadline. He pitched to a 1.68 ERA as the Baltimore Orioles closer. That was in 48 1/3 innings pitched. He had 19 saves. He gets traded at the deadline to the Twins and pitches to a 4.37 ERA down the stretch, and that only carried over into 2023, where he had a 5.95 ERA, and he had stops for 3 different teams. Started with the Twins, ended up with the Marlins, and finally back in Baltimore with the Orioles. His strikeouts were down. His hits and home run rates were both up. He had a whip of 1.5, which means he was giving up a base runner and a half per inning. Not ideal. Now, again, the Mets get him. 1-year, $2 million deal, low risk. He reunites with Edwin Diaz. They both played together on Team Puerto Rico. And also, the WBC bullpen coach for Puerto Rico was Jose Rosado, who is now the bullpen coach for the Mets. So, don't know if that familiarity brought him to the Mets. He also has some familiarity with David Stearns. He started his career in the Brewers organization, was drafted back in 2011 out of high school, debuted in 2015, but really didn't establish himself until 2018. He was, again, a starting pitcher. Wasn't going well for him throughout his career. 2018, Stearns, they convert him to a relief pitcher. He pitches to a 2.75 ERA and 19 2/3 innings pitched. Then he gets traded in a deal for Mike Moustakas to the Royals, and the Royals put him back in the rotation. It did not go well for him there. Ends up in Baltimore again, out of the rotation some. Wasn't breaking right for him. And then in 2022, finally converts fully to being a relief pitcher and has that great success. If you look at what went wrong last year, I really think that there's not a clear thing other than control. Okay. And it's not even like he was walking guys at a crazier rate than he had previously. It was simply not being able to put batters away, too many pitches in the zone that were getting hit hard. You look at the mix of his pitches, and I found it pretty interesting that in 2022, Baseball Savant characterized a sinker that was thrown 50.5% of the time and a four-seam fastball that was thrown 4.5% of the time. This past year, the sinker was thrown 33.9% of the time and the four-seam 16.4% of the time. So the question is, was that by design? Were those two distinct pitches, or was he not getting the same, bite to his sinker and it was being categorized as a four-seam fastball at times? That certainly could have been what happened. But if you combine the numbers and you just try to figure out how hard was he, or how frequently was he throwing his hard stuff, his fastballs, whether it was the sinker or the four seam. 2022, throwing it 55% of the time, the combination of the two pitches. 2023 was 49% of the time. We also saw an uptick in his curveball. So you have to wonder if he just didn't have confidence in his best pitch, and that led to throwing it a little bit less, whether that was going with more straight fastballs because maybe he couldn't locate that sinker, or maybe he was just, leaving that pitch up too much. Again, maybe it was, sinkers that were being categorized as four-seam fastballs. Regardless, what the Mets see in this guy is a potential setup man. And, he has the upside to be a late inning reliever. You can't say that about the other additions that the Mets have made. Some of them, they might break that way. But this guy in the not too distant past, 2022, was one of the best relief pitchers in baseball. This past year, one of the worst. But what the Mets are banking on right now is their pitching lab. They've just established it, and they're just throwing guys through it now to try to find the right pieces and hope that some gems end up coming out of it and they can cobble together a bullpen. So it's a strategy where quantity is just as important as quality, although there is a quality of pitch requirement. A lot of these guys, and we're going to talk about the collection of relievers the Mets have signed so far in the next segment, a lot of them have at least one really good pitch. And it's about fine-tuning their arsenal, their pitch mix, making sure that that one pitch is as crisp as possible, getting their arm angle right, the location right, everything, so that they can be optimized and hopefully be really good relievers. We'll see if it all can come to fruition, but when it comes to the Lopez signing in particular, the vision is there. This is a guy that if he can get back to where he was in 2022, he could legitimately be the second best arm in this bullpen behind Edwin Diaz. Problem is, he could be lost. It's now been almost a year and a half since the deadline of 2022 until through this past season where this guy was not good. So there's risk that he's not going to pan out. And if none of these guys pan out, probably going to be a long season for the Mets. But what I want to do next year is break down all of the other signings that were made as well. What's that one pitch that each of these guys has that the Mets are identifying, and how it can all come together to be a decent bullpen next season. We're going to get to all of that in just a minute here. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. If you even think about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. You got the NBA in-season tournament, a lot of fun to watch those games tonight. The Pacers and Lakers move on to the final game that we played on Saturday. If you want to put a little wager down there, if you are interested in any of the NFL action, college football, all of it is there for you on the FanDuel app, which is so easy to use. And there's a wide range of betting options, including the spread, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to kick off the NFL season. And remember, you place that $5 moneyline bet and you win, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Now, the first thing I did tonight when Jorge Lopez signed is I went to Subtext and sent an update to my Locked On Mets insiders. This is our texting service where I can send you a report anytime some news breaks, anytime there's a big rumor I want to discuss. If I have a hot take, I'll send out a text to our insiders, and Also, if you ever have a question on anything I send or you just want to comment on it, we can communicate back and forth. It's been a lot of fun getting to know some of the everyday listeners a little bit better. So I appreciate all of you who subscribe. You can find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, the Mets have been adding a lot of relief pitchers this offseason, and most of them have been pretty much low or no risk. Guys on minor league deals or split contracts that aren't going to hurt the Mets. And we're going to run through all of them right now. The first one, Cole Sulser. Minor league deal, invite to spring training. He had a 2.70 ERA back in 2021, so there was a time not too far back where he was an effective relief pitcher. Hasn't had it since, but a guy with a really good changeup. That's the pitch for him, and he gives you a different look than a lot of the other guys that they've signed so far. Next name up, Austin Adams. He got a split contract, so maybe a little more, MLB money there if he makes the team, minor league money as well. He's a guy that it's all slider with Austin Adams. He threw his slider 90% of the time last year. Gets crazy break on the pitch, spin rate over 2,900. Also gets really good spin on his fastball, but he doesn't throw that pitch too often. Guy with really good movement that the Mets are going to try to throw into that pitching lab, try to optimize his arsenal and see what they get. Obviously, these guys with the split contracts are valued a little bit more. So I think the Mets have high hopes with Adams. We'll go next to the other split contract they signed, Michael Tonkin. I did spend a lot of time on him on Wednesday's show, so you can go back and listen there or watch on YouTube and find a bigger breakdown of what he has in his arsenal and what he did this past year with the Braves. But he doesn't walk a lot of batters. Good sinker-slider combo. He's a bulk innings guy. With the Braves last year, he was the guy they went to in garbage time to give him multiple innings of relief, and he can serve that role with the Mets as well. Now you got Kyle Crick, a minor league contract, another guy with a high RPM slider, spin rate over 3,000 over the last couple of years, gets over 20 inches of horizontal break. I should actually acknowledge he did not pitch in the MLB last season, but the Rays did sign him, so that does show an organization that usually can find some of these relievers, the diamonds in the rough. They valued Crick. Now, with that said, he didn't end up making the team, and then he didn't pitch for anyone. So we'll see what they have there. But again, minor league contracts don't hurt you. You got Andre Scrub, who had a great season in 2020 for the Astros, but that was, of course, the shortened year. A 1.9 ERA then, hasn't pitched in Major League Baseball since 2021. He's known for his curveball. Great 12-6 action on that curve. In his first 13 innings pitched in winter ball, this is stats that I was able to find on X right after he signed. He had pitched, he had allowed just 2 runs. He had struck out 16 batters, a walk just 1 in 13 innings. So he's throwing the ball well out there. I imagine the Mets noticed it. They sign him, minor league deal. We'll see what happens. Other than that, it's now been the addition of Jorge Lopez. So you look at the entire mix that they've added this offseason. It's Lopez to a guaranteed major league deal. It's Tonkin and Adams on split deals. And then it's minor league contracts to Cole Sulser, Andre Scrub, and Kyle Crick. You look at that collection. If one of those minor league deals work out, home run. If one of those split contracts work out, still sort of a home run as well. If Jorge Lopez can pan out, that could be the grand slam of them all because he could actually be a high leverage reliever. But what the Mets have been doing is they've been adding options. I think they'll keep on doing that. And honestly, if you keep spots open, if they don't sign the established reliever, I hope they get one, and we'll talk about that a bit more in the next segment. But if they keep this bullpen as a pretty open competition, that's going to encourage more guys to go there. If they can convey to these pitchers that, hey, we're going to be able to provide you with the tools to be the best version of yourself. You're going to have that not only in the big leagues, but in Syracuse and everything else. And we're going to be able to keep you charted the whole year and make sure that when you get to the majors, you can succeed. They're going to have not only a deeper bullpen at the big league level, but they're going to have a lot of options at their disposal in Syracuse. And you see which of these guys is throwing the ball well, and you can dip into that depth and be able to plug holes throughout the season. That's critical. And David Stearns has mentioned this, like there's so much volatility with relievers, and that bullpen changes every given week, honestly. I mean, the overall shape of the bullpen can be consistent months on end, but there's gonna be guys that need to be shuttled up and down because they need an arm, because they have a guy that went out and had to throw 45 pitches to get you through a game that got away from you on Friday night. You need a different pitcher to pitch on Saturday. So there's always that churn that happens where some of these guys might end up on waivers and on another team at some point, but you need to collect as many as possible. And Stearns is doing that. And if you can find some guys in there that actually stick for a whole year, that's unbelievable value for the contracts they're signing. But you still wondered, is there room or will the Mets have the appetite to add an established guy? What I want to do in the next segment is I want to talk about that aspect of it, but also look back at David Stearns' success with Milwaukee to show that this is a guy that knows what he's doing, that has built competent bullpens in the past, has cobbled them together on a small budget. Not that the Mets have a small budget, but knows how to find some value with these guys, and why you should trust that even though the numbers don't look pretty on really any of these signings so far, a couple of them are going to pan out, and that's going to help the Mets in a lot of ways this upcoming season. So I want to talk about all of that next. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for your 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Looking back at David Stearns' time in Milwaukee, the bullpens were generally good. I sorted stats for bullpen team stats dating back to 2017, his second full year running the team, and really his first full year. He got hired after the 2015 season, so you have to jump in, and it takes some time. So that's why I wanted to go to 2017. Although I did check in 2016, while the Brewers weren't striking out a lot of batters, they were still top 12 in ERA. But looking at two key stats, ERA and strikeout per nine, you can see a pretty clear picture of what David Stearns values and the general success that brings. So 2017, 3.83 team ERA out of the bullpen. That was ninth best in baseball. Strikeout per nine of 9.67. That was seventh best. 2018, 3.47 ERA, fifth best in Major League Baseball. Strikeout per nine of 10.38. That was third best. 2019, 4.40 ERA. That's 18th best. 10.21 strikeout per nine. That was second best. 2020, 4.17 ERA, 11th best. 11.97 strikeout per nine. That was the best mark in baseball. 2021, 4.02 ERA, 11th best. 10.89 strikeouts per nine. That was again the best mark in the game. 2022, 3.94 ERA, 17th best. 9.67 strikeouts per nine, 8th best. Now, his bullpen had a lot of good relievers in it that carry some of those stats, particularly Josh Hader and Devin Williams, right? Those guys strike out among, league leaders when it comes to, strikeout per nine and have really small ERAs. That's going to really help all those numbers. Also had a great year of Corey Knebel in 2017. But regardless, you see a bullpen that was striking out a lot of batters. And if they had guys that were anchors, guys that were not getting any swing and miss, that were not striking out anyone, guys that were giving up a ton of runs, all these stats would be significantly worse. The bad relievers can drag you down just as much as the great relievers can lift you up. Consistently good bullpens, right? Compared to the Mets, for context. And I just pulled ERA. I didn't even get into strikeouts. 2017, the Mets were 29th in ERA out of the bullpen. 2018, they were 28th. 2019, they were 26th. 2020, they were 18th. 2021, they were actually 9th, which is kind of surprising. 2022, they were 10th. And then this past year, they were 22nd. That's a lot of years where they're in the 20s. David Stearns was never in the 20s when it comes to bullpen ERA. Never had a bottom third bullpen in the league. There was a 17th in there. There was an 18th in there. But other than that, in the top 11 in all those years. And we look at the strikeout rates among the top 10 every single year and among the top 3 in 4 of 6 seasons. So he knows how to identify guys that will get strikeouts, which is what you want out of your relief pitchers. Strikeouts are important to stranding runners and to ultimately getting yourself out of those jams and holding on to leads. So that's where I think the Mets have been looking this offseason. A lot of these guys have the potential to be real strikeout artists. Will they get there? Who knows? A guy like Jorge Lopez, he did strike out a lot of batters in 2022. He's also a guy that gets the ball on the ground a bunch with that sinker. So there is other components to this and putting together a good bullpen. You don't sign Michael Tonkin to get strikeouts. You sign him because he can get outs and give you bulk innings. So there is a mix and match that is required. But I trust the guy making these decisions is what I'm trying to get at here. So when we peel back and look at where the Mets are, you have Edwin Diaz back. That's massive. Brooks Raley gives you a really nice left-handed reliever. You have Drew Smith, and while he's coming off a down year, he's probably still a guy that you can count on to pitch to at least a low 4 ERA. And if he's pitching at his best in a contract year, maybe he does get back to a mid-3s ERA, and he has a decent arm. I don't trust him in leverage, but if he's pitching 6 innings for you, I think that's fine. Jorge Lopez has some upside to be a late inning reliever, but I think you still need at least one guy, one setup man that you can trust. If the Mets don't get that this entire offseason, if they don't find somebody that you can look at and say, all right, that's a good bridge guy to Edwin Diaz. And I'm not counting Lopez as that guy. He could be, but you can't count on that when he just pitched to a 5.95 ERA. If the Mets can give me one relief pitcher, like bringing back David Robertson as an example, they can do that. I'm okay with them rolling the dice on all these guys to fill out the rest of the pen. I really am. Because right now they got 4 relievers that are going to be in their bullpen with Diaz, Raley, Smith, and Lopez. Phil Bickford and Sean Reed-Foley are out of options. That gives them an edge, but doesn't mean they're definitely going to get a job. Adams and Tonkin are the other guys that have a little bit of an edge because they're on those split contracts. So right there, you add all that up, that's 8 relief options. You have Josh Walker and Grant Hartwig, who are on the 40-man. They have plenty of options, so they'll probably be in Syracuse, but we'll see them at some point this year. A lot of optionality with those guys. Then you have Scrubs, Sulser, and Crick. That's minor league signings that could factor in. So overall, I look at 4 sort of guaranteed guys and 9 others that are competing for those 4 final spots in the bullpen. Not to mention, there's every chance that you see a Tyler McGill or a Joey Lucchesi or a Jose Budo pitching as a long man in the bullpen as well. That's certainly an option that the Mets have. Not to mention, in the past, like Corbin Burns was a reliever for a couple of years. You never know. Maybe a Christian Scott or a Mike Vassell or a Blade Tidwell, one of these starting pitching prospects, ends up factoring into the bullpen before they really get a chance to crack a big league rotation. The Mets are going into next year with way more options than they had last year. Now, last year they had more dependable MLB quality relief pitchers, but some of those blew up in their face. So we'll see. We'll see how all of this shakes out. I still need the Mets to give me one. Put somebody in that bullpen that you can trust to pitch an 8th inning for you. Joe Kelly's off the board. He's signed with the Dodgers. Ronaldo Lopez went to the Braves. Jordan Hicks is still out there, but the Mets aren't showing a lot of interest, and he's going to get paid a lot of money. Josh Hader's out there, but there's no way the Mets are going to sign him. The options are going to start to dwindle, but there are still plenty of arms on the market where the Mets can find someone. And I can't deny that I'm holding out hope for the David Robertson reunion. Also, I've predicted multiple times that Brent Suter will be an option. We'll see. Overall, though, expect plenty more of these minor league signings, the split contracts, these low-risk, potential high-reward moves as the Mets just stockpile options so that they can run as many through their pitching lab as possible and see what comes out and sticks. Trust the process with David Stearns. That's where I'm at with all this. Even though you look at the numbers, you look at the names, it does leave a lot to be desired, but you just got to have faith in this new front office. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's show. Also, this week on Locked On Mets until we get some more news. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, trying to make a push to 10,000 subs. So appreciate all of you who get us closer each day, hitting that subscribe button. If you want to become a Locked On Mets insider, you can find a link in the episode description. Now that you're done with the show, if you're watching on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today for your 24/7 coverage of everything going on in the world of sports.